and welcome to A Place Called Through. I'm your host, Patricia Wade Goings. I'm the author of Willpower, The Call to Rise Above. We're broadcasting today from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network, where we share stories of empowerment, encouragement to all who tune in and listen to us all across the globe. It's all done through those charitable donations. So I ask you today for this one little favor. Why don't you give today to help us carry out our mission of hope? You may do so at WYTV7.org. We're honored today to have with us our guest, author Helen Ann Newland. She is here today to share her story of triumph, the victories, but also before she got to that point, she's going to tell you how she had to go through just to be triumph. Miss Helen Newland, we welcome you to this place called Through.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and thank you so much for having me.
It is truly our honor to have you to share your testimony and your story, because certainly you have been through some trials and you have a strong testimony. You've done a lot in your life, but we thank God for your victory. Ms. Newland is going to tell us from the beginning, life had not always been pleasant for her. She's had many challenges to overcome, some that were just very more strong than others, but she overcame. She's victorious in her goal and her ministry today, even though she says she is not a licensed minister, but she does have a ministry of empowerment and encouragement for women across the world. And today we're going to let her go ahead and tell you about her ministry. But before, Ms. Newland, tell us from early on, we know that you were in a relationship very early in your life, and that started your world to unravel. So if you would tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes, because being young, I was a teenager and with my children's father, back then, I was just pretty much didn't have too much direction because of the fact being with him, he was older than myself. And so I was just doing a lot of things with him, thinking it was okay to fit in. And what had me start on that area of the downward spiral was watching him drink and do drugs, alcohol, weed. So I was curious. And so I said, well, maybe if I tried, that would make him, more into me and trying to be accepting. But that wasn't the case. And that's what introduced me to the drug world. And back then I was like 17, 18. We drank and we smoked little weed and stuff, but I was introduced to cocaine and crack cocaine back then. That was just the form where we were living at. People were starting to do it. And I said, well, I would watch him and his cousin do it. So when I first said, let me try it, that's what started that downward spiral. And it progressed. It did progress. I was a young mother at 18 years old. My mother was still there at the time, but I would go off with him and do that. And I thought it was a it thing to do. When they say that first high, when you're trying to catch that first high, I kept on trying to catch it. And see, that caused a whole lot of problems, even being a young person, because I wasn't raised that way, but I thought I was grown and wanted to do things on my own and my way. And it caused a whole lot of things to happen that, it wasn't good at the time being a young mom.
And so because you kind of fell into this, I guess, the want to be popular, the want to be in, want to be accepted by someone who obviously you trusted to be your friend, who you were a friend with. Yes. As this began to unravel, and now you're so into this person, and to now, like you said, trying to get this first feeling, this first high that you've heard so many people talk about. What's your family life like at this point?
Well, at that point, I was trying to hide it, what called a recreational user. And I would work part-time, but see, I never could keep a job because when I was trying to hide being in addiction and then trying to be over there with my kid's father and his friends, that's what's causing a conflict. And my mom, before she started, she was getting sick at that time. And I didn't understand exactly what was going on with her because she didn't want me to know the full detail of her illness at that time. I would do that as a release. I would go off with him and their friends and got to know them and that type of world. and I was doing it so as a release to get away, or I thought that I had a right to because it was Friday or because it was payday, that I could go off and do what I wanted to do. But see, my grandmother, before she passed, she could tell something wasn't right. And I would always shy away from her because I knew I was wrong, because she would look at me in the face and I couldn't look at her. I just say, I love you and go out the door. But that was like I was trying to do a double life. And when I got home, my mom would be in there in the living room. She always would look at me, say, Helen, Ann, what you been doing? I said, I ain't been doing nothing. And I go in there, start eating and carrying on and rattling pots, and she knew something was wrong. But it was hurt me on the inside. But it's like I would call in between two worlds. I know I was supposed to stay over the side where I was raised, but then here I am over there with my children's father wanting to please him. And then finances, of course, I was financing it because he didn't work all the time. So that I was still going over there, and I was going in the wrong direction, so to speak.
So the guy that introduced you to, this addiction, he's the father of your children?
Yes, ma'am. Now, he didn't force me to do it, but out of curiosity, I went on and did it because I was his girlfriend at the time. And I thought that
And
would
you
be.
wanted to belong. You wanted
Yes.
to feel this feeling of acceptance.
Yes,
That you
exactly.
had a man, as people like
Yes.
to say, I got a man. So you wanted
Yes.
to feel all of that. And so
Yes, exactly.
your relationship with your mom, I noticed that you said that your mom, she was failing in health, and she kind of like just really didn't want you to know, I guess, how sick she really was. What kind of relationship did it later on have with you and your mom as her health began to fail and you became more dependent on the substance abuse?
I was rebellious. I can honestly say I was rebellious because my mama, when she was getting, into that condition of her sickness, I would be there and I would cook or I would clean up. But at the same time, if she would say something to me, I was rebellious and acting disrespectful. And that's only because of the fact she may not wanted me to know how sick she was. And I did not want her to know what all I was doing. Now, she knew I drank beer and she knew I might try to drink liquor, which I couldn't hold. But when it came to the substance abuse, I did my best to hide that from her because I did not want, in my heart, I knew it would hurt her. But at the same time, like I said earlier, I thought I was grown. And some certain things that you can't hide from your family. But I never did come clean with her about that. I just kept doing what I was doing. I didn't do it every day, but when I did, I would always separate myself from her. The beer was, something that she knew about, but that drug addiction, she didn't know, but she could tell, people could tell, but she knew I was different. I said like that, and I was. And that's why I tried to stay away until I would get in like early in the morning or something like that to try to slide by. But still, she would always call my name out, and I would just try to go in the room and shut the door or something like that.
But she knew, as a mom, you do
Yes.
know, what your children are doing.
Yes, ma'am.
So what kind of effect had this addiction now? Because now you said earlier that your children, so I'm understanding that you have 3 children.
Yeah.
What kind of effect did that have on you? Because now you're with someone who obviously has an addiction. You have an addiction. Your mom's health is failing, and then you're still raising 3 babies. How were you able to manipulate being a mom and your addiction and in this relationship that you knew was not going to really result in anything good?
It wasn't easy because it would cause a lot of arguments with myself and their dad. And when my oldest son, he was in the area like 4 or 5. And sometimes he would see us argue and fight. And one time he took a little plastic bat, said, quit beating my mama. My daughter was 2. And then my other child, Terrence, he came along like in 1991. So it was pretty much Ashley and Corey. And it was hard because let's say if I wanted to get high, I had to hurry up and get them to sleep. Or I would if they normal children making noise and stuff, I would pop their behind and things like that to make them go to sleep. And then I did not want them to wake up and see or smell anything. But one time they knew something was going on and they came down the steps and seen. And they asked me what was I doing. And of course I lied, but see, it got away with me because I thought they were asleep. And see, here I go. There's another task to try to keep my kids seeing or smelling, you know, because they know that's not burnt smell. What is that? He was 5. And it's amazingly how you think your children, when you're doing wrong, and you think everything is okay, and you know it's not, when your child might start noticing things, or mama's kind of talking fast, or mama's sweating, or mama's not mama's a total different thing in person. And then I'm wondering where he at, because if I would go give him money to go do something with, to bring something back, he would stay gone. Sometimes he didn't even come back. So that happened more than one time too. So it was just like, okay, now he's my kid's dad. I'm supposed to trust him, or I go get him, as we used to call back in the day, re-up, to go get drugs and come back so we could smoke. The kids crying. I'm trying to hurry him, get them sleep. And he would give an excuse, but hurry him, get them sleep, and I'll go over here with my cousin, and then we'll be back. Sometimes he wouldn't even come back. So then I'm sitting there mad. And then the babies, I had to get on them to make them go to bed. And I'm sitting there wanting to get high. And then sometime I would venture out on my own. And that's another story, because that's by the grace of God. Because, you know, if you try to dart out somewhere and your kids asleep, even if it's in the same area where you live, you know, that's your children. And by the grace of God, nothing happened. But, you know, I'll just leave about 20 minutes and come back. And see, that was starting a more in-depth wrongness, because it started happening like that, because anyone could have probably came in, even though I said my doors is shut, but still, you know, that's when that addiction started talking to me, to go out here and do stuff. Then when he wouldn't sometime come back, and then we arguing at the end of the night because we don't have any money. So it was just a back and forth, or going to work hardly with no sleep. And that was something to deal with. And the restaurant work that I did, it was something to deal with. Oh, it's hot back there, ain't it? Yeah, it's hot, all right, because I'm overhung from the night before. So it was a mess. It was.
Well, Miss Newland, we're going to pause right now for a quick commercial, and
Okay.
then we're going to come back and talk to you some more when destiny calls
Mhm.
and when those chains come off.
Mhm.
Again, we've been talking to Miss Helen Ann Newland, who has a true story of how she overcame being abused in all forms, and how her family did not know, but till later the truth came out, and only then she's following now her destiny in her calling. Stay tuned with us here at A Place Called Through on WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network.
Mhm.
Mr. Happy Living here. I love good things made by good people. That's why I love Dry Farm Wines. I first met the man known as the healthiest wino on the planet back in 2016. He said his wines don't cause headaches or hangovers, and that he started his company because most wine consumed in the US is highly processed and loaded with unnatural nasties. Like most processed food, it's toxic. That very night, I made a big health decision. Toxic wines out, natural wines in. It's been 4 years since I made the switch, and I feel great. Go to happyliving.com and select Partners in Happy to get your first bottle of natural wine for a penny. And I'll donate 8% of every order placed during the entire month of November to WYTV7. Share the gift of natural wine and pour some love this holiday season.
And welcome back to A Place Called Through from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network, where we're sharing a story today with Ms. Helen Ann Newland. Her story and her testimony of overcoming. At an early age, she became addicted to drugs through a friend who later on, she had 3 children by this same man who caused her to fall into an addiction. Her family was estranged at this time, and her life was going down, down, down. But once again, the chains began to fall loose. And at this point, we're going to ask Miss Newland now to take us from the abuse and to your mother's illnesses, because we noticed that your mother unfortunately has passed on. And so we want you to kind of talk about your relationship and some things that occurred at that time of your mother's passing and how you escaped being in this relationship. So if you will, bring us to that point, please.
Yes, my mother passed in July 6th of 1988. She lived long enough to see my daughter Ashley born. And at that time, that was me, myself, Corey, and her. And their dad wasn't coming around as much at that time because he was going back and forth, back and forth. You know, it was always another female somewhere. So at that time, you know, back and forth, we allowed it. But I was just, at that point, I was saying, well, I wasn't out of my addiction yet, but it was a time that I was starting to make decisions. Now, I would stop, go back. And it was like, when I stopped, I felt good about myself. And then I would have that still urge. And that's only because of the fact I said I had been by myself. I didn't have that standing ground. I didn't have that foundation just yet.
Mhm.
But I knew. I kept looking at my kids, and I was working then. I was working a lot. I was a shift manager at Pizza Hut at that time, and I was doing a lot better. But when I had said I got tired of him coming by, you know, it always would be some kind of cunning way to try to get me to go back and do things. And it was still a struggle with him because he would always throw at the part that he was my children's father. But it was beginning to have, and it was God when you hear people say something said. And I knew that was the Lord talking to me then. And it still took till after Terrence was born, because he was born in 91. And I was, mama had passed. And then my grandmother, I was with her for a while. And my grandfather, he had passed like a year before that. And I was living with her. Now, I wasn't too much into the addiction then, but I had to, I respected mama too, but it was because I was around their dad that I did a lot of disrespectful things. But after she passed, I started living with my grandmother, and that respect for her, but I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and I still go back a little bit, but not like I did when I was with their dad. But that's when I always would have her and hear her praying and humming through that house. And as a little girl, she and my mama always taught me, and my granddad always taught me about the Lord. So I was still getting those seeds put into me after I was grown. And the final straw, after those times that I would get these good jobs and go back, I just didn't have that foundation. And it was like I was taught it, but it had to become truly real into me, not just read words from the word of God. I had to have that securely into my heart and to know that I can make it and to break those chains. So when I did get arrested a couple of times in the restaurants that I worked in, because it was just that same thing. I would do good for a while. And then and it would be always something or someone to pull me back, because when you're in the addiction world, it's always people that have that same kind of language or look. And and I was doing good, and then I see someone, I said, well, I know I don't need to do it. And I would ask, and see, that was the issue with me. I would ask, or we would say words like, you know, anything, and people caught on to that. But when that final time, and when I was a manager, and I'm freely to say it, I was a manager of a restaurant, cookout, and I heard him. He said, Helen, don't you take that money.
Well, let me back up, if you will. Let's go back to let's talk about the embezzler's redemption.
Yes.
Because you noticed that, yes, you did work at several places, but
Yes,
you
ma'am.
were also arrested
Yes, ma'am.
for some crimes that you actually committed and served time for.
Yes, ma'am.
Your mother has passed, and some things started happening and changes, even though you're now at a point where you're hearing this voice, trying to recognize this voice and deal with this voice speaking to you, that now these chains are trying to come off of you, but you're still holding on to the chain. So after your mother passes, I noted in some of your information that you provided to us where you actually stole your mother. Now she's deceased, but you continued to collect her
Yes.
disability checks for years
Mm-hmm.
until you got caught.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How were you able to collect, deceased
Yes.
individuals' money for so long?
Mm-hmm.
And when the arrest occurred, the devastation that it had to have, I'm sure, on your family was horrific, because at this point here, your children were where? Who was caring for your children? So talk to us about that, the embezzlement,
Yes.
because you also mentioned earlier too that you were a manager at a restaurant, and I know that also that you've worked at several other restaurants where taking the money was a way to support yourself and still yet this addiction. So if
Mm-hmm.
you would talk to us about this embezzlement and the redemption.
Yes, ma'am. And like you said about my mother's checks, back then I was saying, oh, just another way of having income. That caught up with me because SBI came. Compared back in the day, you could go to grocery stores and say, I'm so and so's cousin or so and so's daughter. They know you by face. The manager would say, it's okay, cash the check. That went on for 2 to 3 years. And SBI caught up with me, did a handwritten test, and it caused me to have some time. I got out, still got good jobs at restaurant management, but that embezzler's redemption, as far as that is concerned, when I heard God tell me, don't take that money, I was doing very well. Not in addiction as much because the kind of job I had, I was working about 50 to 70 hours a week. And but that last time, when I heard him say, don't take that money, and I took it. And that was all night binge, all night.
How
And
much money did you take during the course of you taking money from the different businesses?
it was over one plate, all three restaurants. It totaled, now the last one, it was about $3,000 in cash in the bag and then 2,000 in checks. The other one really over about $10,000 because of the fact, and what amazingly, I don't even know how I could go back to work the next day. That's what, when I look back at that and I seen that one, it was one morning that I went in there and won some in the morning, one restaurant, and took the money. And I went and got high. It was my day off the next day. And then I came back a day afterward and see back then they would, of course, the banks would be counting the money, but it was just the general manager. He did not realize all that money was gone till they called and said, well, uh, ain't nothing in here but the checks. And he said, what? What do you mean nothing in here but checks? And then the money was gone. And with my foolishness, I was thinking, well, they're not going to catch me. And it's only one other manager there. And he dated her, and I was the other one. So I don't know why I thought that they wouldn't figure it out. It was me. That was the denial in my mind of addiction.
Mhm.
And I came back to work. I don't know how I did that, but that was crazy because they knew it was me because it wasn't them. And
Well, it was pretty much the substance abuse that was still talking to you.
yes.
And we noticed that now you've heard this voice. Bring us to this point that now that you've served your time,
Mm-hmm.
you've come out now, you've got reunited with your family,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to progress on. And you heard a strong voice telling you, okay, no more chains. You're done with this. And I noticed that you also, supporting people in prison. You have a ministry going on there. You have a ministry in the church. But bring us to that point now that, okay, I've been in prison. This is where I am. And we're kind of needing to wrap it up because we're running out of time, but I really want to get it all in for you.
Well, the good thing of it is I heard the Lord tell me before I was released. He said, Helen, if you keep doing this, you're going to be here the rest of your life. I made that decision. I had to make that decision. I was happy to get home earlier. Supposed to came home in September of 2003, came home in August 2003, and I knew I had to stay focused. I was in a halfway house. My elder helped me get into the High Point, the High Point Salvation Army transitional housing, and my probation officer, they worked with me. They believed in me, but she was hard on me because she said that, good and well, you got these kids, you got to make it this time because you can go back and be gone for a very long time. So it was a transition from halfway house, the Salvation Army. I stayed there 8 to 9 months. My probation officer helped me get my job. She spoke for me. And I stayed there until January, February of 2004. I was able to get my 3-bedroom apartment, showed the kids, and I was making $8 an hour at a pressing company, $8 an hour in a 3-bedroom apartment, $345 a month. But the way it was kept, it looked like a mansion because people gave me things. I had to keep on holding on to the word of God. And that's where I joined our ministry in July of 2004. And I've been there ever since. And it hadn't been easy, but I did not have all those urges that came to me like before. And if it did, I was able to shake it off because I had made a decision, not only in my mind, but in my heart. And I knew I had to be somewhere to keep me grounded throughout all that time. And that's what worked for me the last time, is to stay focused. And I did not allow and did not have nobody around me that had that association of people. And that's what kept me all the way until where I'm at today.
And that's truly a blessing that, you've survived through all and that you can empower and encourage others. Unfortunately, we've already run out of time, Ms. Newland, but I want to thank you for being my guest. And we just thank God for who he is and what he's done in your life. We do know that you do have a ministry. And if you would go ahead, if anyone wants to reach out to you, tell them how they can reach out to you and also get a copy of your book. If there's any resources that you know that may help someone else, if you would, please share that with us at this time. And again, it's been my pleasure, and I thank you for being my guest.
Yes, ma'am. Well,
Please
if anyone
share.
yes, ma'am, excuse me. If anyone would like to reach out to me, you can go to overcomers351@gmail.com, or on Facebook. I have a women's inspirational page, Women Who Are Daily Surviving Overcomers. And you can get my book, A Daily Surviving Overcomers, by going to Google Books or Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and also at Walmart and other places. Just put in my name in Google, Helen Ann Newland, or the book, A Daily Surviving Overcomer. And you can get in contact with me on Facebook or through my email address.
Awesome. Awesome. To our listeners and to our viewers, please follow Miss Helen Newman. She truly has a story, and it's real people. And that's what we do here on WYTV7. We share real stories of real people. God bless you. We're wishing you the very best. Again, I thank you for coming today at a place called Through. I've been your host, Patricia Wade Goings, and we're broadcasting from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network. Remember that one favor, if you will, to help us continue our mission of hope, please make your donation and do so at WYTV7.org. Again, I am your host of A Place Called Through, Patricia Wade Goings. And if you'd like to be my guest, you may call me at area code of 843-608-9744 by email at pgoingswp@gmail.com. You can follow me also on Facebook at A Place Called Through, at Willpower, The Call to Rise Above. I am the author of Willpower, The Call to Rise Above, and that book is now available to you on Amazon. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Stay tuned for more to come on A Place Called Through.